So now I want to get into the slider, which we're going to be using a library called Swiper. So if we go to the API page, it pretty much tells us what we have to do. Now, as far as the versioning, I'm using the latest version, which is Swiper 8, and I've already included in the theme that I included in the resource files. So if we look in the lib, we have both the JavaScript and the CSS, and we're using that in our index.html. So right here is the JavaScript and here's the CSS. So we only need that on the index.html because that's the only place we're putting it. Now you do need to structure the HTML in a certain way. So you can see the main container as a class of swiper, then an additional required wrapper, and then you have your slides, which are going to have a swiper slide class. Now, if we look at our index.html, we scroll down here, you'll see I have the structure in place. I have a class of swiper, we have the wrapper, and then in a comment, I have one slide, right? So the slide is going to have the image with a link around it, and then it's going to have the rating. So if I were to uncomment this and come back over here, it's going to look like this. So basically what I'd like to do is this class of swiper slide, we're gonna cut that because we're gonna output that through JavaScript for each slide that we want. So let's go ahead and save that, and we'll go over to our script.js, and what I want to do is create a function to display the slider. So let's put this, let's see, where should we put this? Show spinner, fetch it. We'll go right above or right below the display background image, but of course you can put it wherever you want. So let's say display slider movies, and we'll say function display slider. And we're going to want to make this async because we are going to be fetching from the API. So let's say async function display slider. Okay, and then as far as the results, we're going to get those. So I'm going to destructure the results, and we want to await on the fetch API data function. And the endpoint that we're going to want to hit is going to be movie/now playing. So that's going to be like the most new releases, movies that are in the theaters or whatever, or on HBO Max, however they do it now. So that should get us our results. Now, let's just console log those results and make sure that that's happening. Now, this display slider, we only want to run on the home page, so we're going to go right to index.html and say display slider. So now if we come over here and we open up our console, we should see, and there we go. So we have an array of the now playing, and we have access to all these fields, all this data. So let's go back up to display slider, and what we'll do is this results is it's an array of the now playing movies. So let's say results, and we're gonna loop through these. So we'll say for each, and let's say for each result, then let's create a new div, because remember we need that swiper slide div, which I actually think is in the clipboard. Yeah, so we're not going to need this. We're going to create that and then put this stuff inside of it, but I'll keep this in the clipboard for now. So let's say const, and we'll call this, we'll just call it div. So div equals document dot create element, and we're going to create a div, and then we need to add the class on it. So let's take that div and let's do class list dot add, and we're going to add the class of swiper dash slide because that needs to wrap every slide. And then let's take our div and let's do inner HTML and set that to a template string. And what I'm going to do is paste in what I copied, but I'm going to get rid of the wrapping div because we're creating that through JavaScript. So the ending div and then this here. So this should be our inner HTML. And then what we can do is replace, like the ID, for instance, we want that to be dynamic. So we're going to change that to, let's say, actually in my for each, results for each, instead of result, let's say movie. So that way we can just do, movie dot ID. All right, and then for the image, see, for the image, I don't think we have to check for the image, because I think all the now playing will always have an image. It's kind of the older obscure movies that don't have the images, so we don't need to check for it. If you want to, you can, but I'm just going to go ahead and replace, let's see, we're going to replace this source, and in here, we need to put the URL first, so we'll say HTTPS, and the URL is going to be image.tmdb.org / and then t/p/ let's do w500 no, actually we don't need a slash after that. We just want to put the poster path, so movie.poster_path. And then for the alt, we'll put the movie title. So let's get rid of that and say movie.title. And then let's see, for the vote here, or the rating, let's get rid of the hard-coded 8, and instead let's say movie dot, and then it's going to be vote_average out of 10. And then we just want to insert this into the DOM. So let's say document.query selector, and we're going to select the wrapper, so swiper dash wrapper, and then we want to just append child, and we're going to append that div. All right, now we do have a couple other things to do here. There's some options. We basically need to initialize this, and we can add options. So we do this by creating a new swiper object. Okay, so but I'm going to add down here, after where we add to the DOM, we're going to call a function called init swiper. And that we can just create, we'll just create right under it. So let's say function init swiper. So here we want to initialize swiper. So we have an object, let's say new swiper, and in here we're going to pass in the class of swiper. So that's the element to target. And then for the options, we can pass in an object, and the options I'm going to use here, and if you want to change some of these, you can, but I'm going to say slides per view and set that to 1. Now the reason I'm setting this to 1 is because we can actually specify breakpoints as well. So I'm going to set it to 1 initially, meaning one movie, but then I'm going to say for the 500 pixels and up, you know, if the width is 500 pixels and up, then we'll set it to 2. If it's 700 pixels and up, we'll set it to 3, and if it's 1200 pixels and up, we'll set it to 4. So I'm just initially setting it to 1. And then we can also do the space between, which I believe is just pixels, so we're going to put 30 there. And then let's do free mode. Free mode, I believe, is where you can just like click and drag it yourself. So I'm going to set that to true. And then loop, obviously we want that to loop. We don't want it to just stop at the end. And then let's say for autoplay, I'm going to set the delay. And by the way, all these options should be in the documentation. I know I got them from somewhere. Yeah, all here. This is all, every option you can have. So if you want to look through this and you want to change how it works, then you can. And this is what I meant about the breakpoints. So we're going to do that. All right, now the delay between slides, I'm going to do 4 seconds, but this is in milliseconds, so 4,000. And I'm going to set this, disable on interaction. I'm going to set that to false. What that means is if you hover over it, then it stops, but I'm going to set it to false. But again, you can set whatever to what you want. Now, after autoplay, this is where I'm going to set breakpoints. So breakpoints, and you can do this in a few different ways. I'm just going to do pixel size. So we'll say 500. So this means anything that's 500 or up. Let's say slides per view, and now I'm going to set that to 2. Okay, and then what I'll do is just copy this down twice, and this one is going to be 700, and then I'm going to set it to 3. And then this one will do 1200, and slides per view for that will do 4. Okay, so now we should be all set. We have our knit swiper, which is creating the swiper object, passing in everything it needs. We're calling that after we add the data to the div. To the DOM. Oh, to the div, I guess, is true as well. But where the hell is it? Right here. So display slider. We get the results. We loop through. We add them to the DOM. And then we initialize swiper so that it actually functions. All right, I don't believe there's anything else we need to do. So let's save that and let's try it out. Just close that. All right. So we're seeing 4 of these right now, right? 4 at a time because the viewport is 1200 or more. And it looks like it's working fine as far as how it's sliding. And this is what I believe is free mode. I can grab onto it and kind of move it myself. And then if I were to make the browser smaller, once it hits 700, then we get 3 at a time or per view. And then once we hit 500, we get 2. And under that is the initial size, which is going to be 1. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. Now, if I click on one of these, like Smile, which is a really good movie, I thought, you can see it takes us right to the page because we have the ID here, and it takes us to movie details. And in that JavaScript, we're getting the ID here, and we're fetching the movie to display on the page. And we have a back button, which will take us back to, basically back to the home page or the movie page. All right. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I really like this library. It's very simple to use. It looks good. You can have absolutely any content you want. We have movies with the rating and stuff, but you could put absolutely anything in here. And there's so many different options that you can make it do whatever you want. So you don't need a library for everything, and you could build this without one, but I really like this library, so I wanted to introduce it to you guys. And, you can use it in future projects. Okay, so now I think the last major thing that we want to get into is going to be, oh, and by the way, you could do one for TV shows if you wanted to do that. Obviously, you couldn't use like in theaters or whatever, but I guess new shows, you could have a slider. But I'm just going to keep it on the movies page. But yeah, the next big thing we want to do is the whole search functionality. So we'll start to get into that next.